Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order. Quorum being present, the committee meets today to consider a resolution adopting the rules of the committee for the 115th Congress and to announce subcommittee assignments. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Welcome. Welcome back. It's an honor and privilege to serve in the Congress, and it's certainly an honor and a privilege to be on this committee and to chair this committee. I look forward to a productive, vibrant discussion. We've got a lot of weighty topics over the next 2 years that we will address, and I want to thank the members in advance for their participation, their service, and their commitment. And the host of witnesses, we've laid out, I think, a pretty good agenda, but this committee also is one that will react when events happen along the way. And I want to thank in advance our ranking member, Mr. Cummings. I'm very blessed to have a good working relationship with him. We obviously don't agree on all the issues, not even necessarily the majority of the issues. But I have the greatest respect for the ranking member and his perspective. And if we're going to do the country right and do the country justice, we're going to do this together, and we're going to listen to each other, not talk past each other, and hopefully not just flail and put on a show, that we're actually doing things. And Mr. Cummings talks about this repeatedly, and life is too short on this earth. We actually want to get some stuff done, and this is an opportunity. The name of this committee is the Oversight and Government Reform, and I hope that we live up to the duty and obligation that we have on both sides of the oversight and the government reform. We often focus on the oversight, but I see a great opportunity in the 115th Congress to also engage in lots of the reform aspects of the Congress. One of the things I'm deeply concerned about is the national debt. It's hard to fathom what $20 trillion looks like, but obviously the path we're on is unsustainable. Time and again, this committee has heard from inspectors general, we've heard from the Government Accountability Office, we've heard from whistleblowers, and we hear about waste, fraud, and abuse throughout the federal government. We have a lot of good, hard-working, patriotic federal workers, and you'll hear me say that time and time again, but there are some bad apples out there, and there are some people that are wasting some money in doing those types of things, they're doing those things that they really shouldn't be doing. So we're going to pursue a robust legislative agenda aimed at reforming how this government does business. One of the things we'll be looking at is long overdue civil service reform. As I said, a lot of good quality employees doing the right thing, but everybody gets harmed. The citizens, the taxpayers, co-workers, you name it. When we have people that engage in nefarious or unseemly behavior, it hurts everybody, and we need to be able to address those more swiftly. In particular, the committee heard in the last Congress a lot about sexual misconduct and sexual harassment. Yet as we go out and look into how the executive branch works, you're going to find a terrible inconsistency on table of penalties, definitions. That is something right here at the beginning we would like to address. I think we'll find good bipartisan support on how we address that. We're also going to work on, the President has already issued a hiring freeze, and we're going to, I think, engage in that as well. I support and applaud the President for the overall goal, but let's also understand there are certain departments and agencies that do need more employees. We have spent considerable time, for instance, dealing with Secret Service. There are about 1,000 agents and officers short. We have to address the IT situation. Attracting and retaining IT personnel is of key interest to this committee. And certainly at the Veterans Administration, there are things that we have to deal with as well. We also will be looking at the federal retirement system. You know, in our state of Utah, we made the transition from a defined benefit program to a defined contribution program. It was good for the state employees. It was great for the financial books in the long term. We have a duty and obligation to live up to the obligations that federal employees have been earning. But as we look at new generations of people entering the federal workforce, you'll see the committee address this, which is part of our jurisdiction. We also have the need for postal reform. Now, postal reform, I don't think necessarily Ms. Lawrence probably campaigned on it, but there are probably not many others that campaigned on postal reform. But I can tell you and I can assure you that it's something that affects literally every single American. And they're on a financial trajectory that is unsustainable, and we need to engage in bipartisan postal reform. We passed out of the 114th Congress unanimously a bill that is a good starting point. Hopefully it's very similar. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like, but postal reform in a bipartisan way that gets to the President's desk is something that is certainly a goal for this committee. We will work continuously on government transparency. We passed out FOIA reform, Freedom of Information Act. It was a good accomplishment in the 114th Congress, but we need to make sure that that is sustained and that it is executed the way it should be. And then we also need to look at the acquisition, the federal acquisition system. I know that Mac Thornberry, the Chairman of Armed Services, is looking at acquisition reform, particularly as it relates to armed services, but it is something that we will spend time on. There are literally hundreds of billions of dollars that should be addressed. I want to also thank in advance and applaud what Mr. Hurd and Mr. Conley have done with the Modernizing Government Technology Act, something that we will address sooner rather than later. Dealing with the IT issues, something that our committee is uniquely situated for, and we've had good bipartisan work to make that happen. There are other reforms and certainly investigations, but I want every member to know, as certainly the ranking member, we're a phone call away, if not a visit away, and anybody on either side of the aisle, I would love to chat with them and want to make sure I'm highly accessible. We are about to address a rules package on which we've worked very closely with the minority. I do anticipate there will be a few amendments. It's essentially the same rules package as we had the last Congress. We had to do some conforming with an adjustment to the House rules. We also had some tweaks and adjustments that we had to do in updating the subcommittee names as we have tweaked those along the way. Again, I look forward to working with people on both sides of the aisle, and I'd now like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I join our Chairman Chaffetz in welcoming all of our returning members and the new members joining our committee for the first time. It is a tremendous honor to serve as your ranking member, and I look forward to working with you over the next 2 years. I first, Mr. Chairman, want to ask the committee's indulgence this morning. If I may, I'd like to take a moment to extend my sincerest thanks to each and every one of you for the support you have shown for my staff member, Katie Malone. What Katie and her family have gone through and are still going through is an unimaginable tragedy. That blaze it took from her 6 beautiful children, 11-year-old Bridget, 10-year-old Amelia, 3-year-old twins Amanda and Zoe, and 2-year-old William and 9-month-old Daniel. Just a catastrophic event, and they were lost literally in a matter of a few minutes. Among the first expressions of support were the notes and cards and financial support from people right here in this room. Chairman Chaffetz and Chairman Gowdy and many of our colleagues, staff members from the majority and minority. It was an inspiring response to the heartbreaking calamity. As a matter of fact, it was Chairman Gowdy and Chairman Chaffetz and the staff that we first got notes of empathy and sympathy, and I really do appreciate that. And Katie does too, by the way. We made sure she sees everything that I get. And I want to thank the staff members for extending themselves to us. Katie has been with me for 11 years and has dutifully served our constituents. She has a long road ahead of her, along with her husband Bill and their surviving children Aaron, Jack, and Jane. But that road has been made a little easier because of the generosity of you and many others. So I just wanted to take a moment to simply say thank you. It means so much to Katie, and it means so much to her family. She was released from the hospital just Friday, and again, I thank you. Now to the business of today's meeting. On Friday, we witnessed one of our nation's greatest rituals, the peaceful transfer of power from one president to another. The inauguration was a transformative moment, but it's not just about one man. It is not just about the office of the president. It is about the future of all Americans, and it is also about the future of our democracy. When I talk about serving in Congress, I often say that this is our watch. This is our watch. And I mean it more and more every day. When we work together in a bipartisan way, as we have in the past, we accomplish great things together. And the chairman can attest to the fact that we have really done some significant things together. Our work in this committee must not be driven by the next election, but it must be guided by the vision of creating a more perfect union for generations yet unborn. I've often said that our children are the living messages we send to a future we will never see. The question is, how will we send them? Not many people know this, but over the last 2 years, I joined the chairman in signing more than 740 bipartisan letters to the Obama administration, state and local officials, and outside entities. 740 letters. I think that may be a record for a Democrat joining Republican letters. We conducted bipartisan investigations of the Secret Service, law enforcement agencies monitoring the cell phones of American citizens, which, to his credit, has been one of the chairman's greatest priorities. As he just said, sexual misconduct at the National Park Service and leadership problems at the Chemical Safety Board. These were not partisan issues for me because conducting vigorous oversight of the executive branch is our constitutional duty. It is our duty. When we put up our hands, we swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, obviously, we have a new president, and I'm not naive. I know Republicans are not going to investigate President Trump with the same urgency that they investigated President Obama and Secretary Clinton for the past 8 years. But our oversight cannot be non-existent. Just as I signed more than 740 letters with the chairman during the Obama administration, I fully expect the chairman to sign letters with me to the Trump administration. Unfortunately, I've been extremely saddened by what we have seen since the election. On November 14th, I wrote to the chairman requesting a review of President Trump's massive global entanglements and the conflicts of interest they pose after Republican and Democratic ethics experts raised concerns. Unfortunately, I never received a response to that request. On November 17th, I wrote to the chairman requesting an investigation of Russian interference in our election after he requested more information about the issue. I did not receive a response to that either. On November 28th, all committee Democrats joined together in sending the chairman a letter requesting a review of the President's conflicts of interest and potential constitutional violations. But again, we never received a response to that letter. With all due respect, these are serious requests, and they are based on bipartisan concerns, including from Senator McCain, Senator Graham, Richard Painter, and even Republicans on this very committee. However, instead of responding to us, the chairman went on national television and mocked what we called Democratic, and I quote, flailing, unquote. It is not flailing when you want to make sure that the very fabric of our democracy is maintained. It's not flailing when you want to make sure that organizations like the CIA, the FBI, I can go down the line, the Office of Government Ethics, are sound. And so he did not mention the many Republicans who share these concerns. And so we have now sent a number of other letters requesting information from the incoming Trump administration, including information about security clearances, attempts to provide the President's children with access to highly classified information, and this committee knows how much we've spent with regard to classified information, the finances of the Trump Foundation, and conflicts of interest involving the President's National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn. The chairman appears to have no interest in joining these. He says these issues are, and I quote, speculative, end of quote, that he will not go on, quote, a fishing expedition, end of quote. But last fall, at the height of the presidential campaign, this committee rushed to hold 6 emergency hearings on Secretary Clinton as the chairman issued a flurry of unilateral subpoenas. This was after the FBI concluded unanimously that there was no basis for any criminal prosecution. To me, there is a great irony here. The very first letter to come out of our committee regarding the Trump administration, conflicts of interest, was the chairman's letter 2 weeks ago addressing the Office of Government Ethics for raising concerns about the President's refusal to divest. Chairman accused the director of acting unethically for raising his concerns publicly without doing more of an investigation. But the chairman himself has publicly commended the President's plan to divest, proclaiming, and I quote, he's going to great lengths to be as responsible as possible, end of quote. How can we come to this conclusion if we haven't held one hearing, conducted not a single interview, or obtained not a single document? Finally, let me close with this. Under the House rules, committees are supposed to adopt oversight plans detailing the investigations they're going to conduct. 2 weeks ago, the chairman, to his credit, sent letters to the chairman of all standing committees. He wrote, and I quote, "Congressional oversight of the executive branch is one of our most important constitutional duties," end of quote. I agree. He also wrote, and I quote, "As you begin the process of organizing, I encourage you to consider your oversight plans as one of your first items of business," end of quote. I could not agree more. The problem is we're not doing it ourselves. We did not make our oversight plan one of our first items of business. Other committees like the Energy and Commerce Committee are considering their oversight plans today as we speak. This is now our third week of a new Congress, and we have a dozen hearings scheduled for the next month. But we have not seen a draft of our oversight plan. We have not had a single meeting about it. And when my staff asked when we could expect it, they got no date. Our committee is most effective when we work together to expose problems and fix them. Our goal has always been one of prevention. One of prevention. And yesterday, to his credit, when we met with the head of the Office of Government Ethics, the head of Government Ethics said something about something that had been said by the President's Chief of Staff. And every member needs to hear this. He said that when he was told to watch out, he said it had a chilling effect upon his agency and himself. The only reason I raise that is I go back to what I said earlier. Our committee stands in a very unique position. We really do. History will look back at this moment and ask the question, did we do what we were supposed to do in our sphere with our authority and make sure that we maintain this democracy? And I do not say these words lightly, because I realized that if we don't guard this democracy, we will not have a democracy to pass on to our children. And so it's far better to prevent problems before they happen rather than attempting to remedy them after the fact. On behalf of all the Democratic members of the committee, we implore our Republican colleagues to work with us in a bipartisan way. And Mr. Chairman, I thank you, I really do, for all that you have done, and thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. I will hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who'd like to submit a written statement. At this point, we would like to introduce our new members. We're pleased on the Republican side of the aisle to have 4 members who are returning. That is, they were on the committee, left the committee, but are now back on the committee. They include the former chairman of the committee, Mr. Darrell Issa, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mark Sanford, Virginia Fox from North Carolina, who's also the chairman, serving as the chairman in this 115th Congress, and Dennis Ross of Florida. We're pleased to have Mr. Ross back here as well. We have 2 freshman members of the committee. Jamie Comer is from Kentucky's 1st Congressional District. He's a graduate of Western Kentucky University with a degree in agriculture. He's a former member of the Kentucky State House and the former Kentucky Commissioner of Agriculture, proud father of 3 children, and I hope we're able to come join us here at some point. But his perspective and being from Kentucky and certainly as a former commissioner on agriculture, I think will be great assistance to the committee, and we're pleased and thrilled to have him. We also have Mr. Paul Mitchell, who's joining us. He's a graduate of Michigan State University. He's the former CEO of the Ross Medical Education Center. He's the former chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition of Michigan, which proposed opposed sales and gas tax increases known as Proposition 1 in the state of Michigan. Proud father of 6 children. We're thrilled to have him involved and engaged, and joining us here on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, so welcome to the two of you as well. And now I'd like to yield to Mr. Cummings to introduce the new Democratic members. They are not yet fully populated. There will be additional members, but for those that are new here, we'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce the new members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I expect that we will have our new members hopefully by the beginning of next week. We are very pleased that Representative Val Demings has joined us, who made history as Orlando's first female chief of police as part of a 27-year career with the Orlando Police Department. She represents Florida's 10th Congressional District. Welcome. Mr. Raja Krishnamurthy, am I right? You know, it's interesting. I've been practicing it all day. And then when I guess I didn't practice like I wanted to play the game. But anyway, you got it. Who served as Illinois Deputy Treasurer and Special Assistant Attorney General. He represents the 8th District of Illinois and is taking the seat of our former colleague, Tammy Duckworth. And then Representative Jamie Raskin, who hails from the great state of Maryland, my colleague from Maryland, former 3-term Maryland State Senator and Professor of Constitutional Law. We could use some of that. At American University. He represents the 8th District of Maryland, which was held by another former committee member, now Senator Chris Van Hollen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The committee will now consider a resolution adopting the rules of the committee. The clerk will designate the resolution.
Rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, U.S. House of Representatives, 115th Congress.
Without objection, the resolution adopting the rules of the committee will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The resolution has already been distributed and should be at each of your desks. Does any member wish to speak on the resolution? It is the committee's intention to postpone any votes on amendments into one period of time at the end of the organizational meeting to give members predictability in scheduling. Hopefully we can do this before votes are called, but votes may be called in the next 15 minutes or so. And if there are recorded votes, we will come back, or don't get through the business, we will come back immediately after votes. I have an amendment at the desk. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment to the Rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, offered by Mr. Chaffetz of Utah.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. It's a minor technical changes, correction on line 33, Clause D of Rule 2 to insert, quote, or a subcommittee, end quote, after the committee, as well as a technical correction on line 45 in Clause D of Rule 4 to replace, quote, that member, end quote, and insert any member of the committee, end quote. The amendment is in your folders. I hope this is easily to get through. I encourage members to adopt it. Any other further discussion on the amendment? Gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Kahn. I'm sorry. Are there any other amendments, any other comments? Amendment to the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Gentleman.
Engage in equality. Is that? Okay. All right.
Hearing no further comments, without objection, the amendment is adopted. Recognize the gentleman from Maryland.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to engage in a quick colloquy with you on a couple of items. First, I would like to memorialize our understanding surrounding the new language in Committee Rule number 15. Rule 15F2 permits the committee to take a deposition without a member present, provided the House is not in session at the time and it has been, quote, authorized, unquote, by the committee. Our staffs discussed the language in this rule in great detail, and they both agree that it requires a committee vote in order to hold a deposition without the presence of a committee member. In order to make sure that the record is clear, can you confirm, Mr. Chairman, that the understanding of our staff that a committee vote is required before holding a deposition without a member present? Is that accurate?
If the gentleman will yield, it is my understanding that pursuant to House rules, it is our intention to conform with the House rule. We may, as the chairman and as the ranking member, mutually agree to move forward on that. If we do not mutually agree, pursuant to the new House rule, we would need to move to a vote on that particular action. This does not preclude my ability as chairman under our rules package to issue a subpoena or do this when we are in session, but pursuant to the rule that was adopted by the full House, yes, I do believe you're correct. With the exception, the note, the edit I would make to your comment would be one regarding our ability to work together. If we mutually agree, then we can move forward.
Very well. At the beginning of the last Congress, we agreed that our staffs would begin working together to develop a document protocol for our committee, which is something the House parliamentarian strongly recommends. You agreed during our organizational meeting to, quote, work together to come to a mutual agreement here, end of quote. However, when I asked to set a target date, you stated that you did not want to do that because our staffs, and I quote, are making progress and let's see how they progress, end of quote. You also stated that although you wanted to see the progress, you would be, quote, happy to revisit this with you, end of quote. Yet, 2 years later, we have still not finalized any document protocol. Can we now agree on a target date for completing a document protocol? I defer to you on how long we should allow our staff to iron out our details. A month, two?
It is our commitment to make those documents that are made available to the committee available to both sides of the committee. I think our staffs have worked well. I didn't see this as a problem in the 114th Congress. The bulk of our staff is the same. I'm still the chairman. I have every intention of proceeding as we have in the past.
Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Chairman, at our committee's organizational meeting last Congress, we memorialized a critical agreement for the record, and I want to reaffirm that agreement today. Essentially, we agreed that we would not go after each other's staff. We agreed that if an issue arises that raises questions, that we will talk with each other, as we have done in the past, first about it and hopefully resolve it in a positive and a constructive way. I believe this agreement has worked well over the past 2 years. I think both of our staffs have worked together in a very professional way and even forming friendships across the aisle. And I have expressed it many times. I have a phenomenal amount of respect for your staff. They have always treated us with great respect, and I really appreciate that. And I hope mine have done the same for you. We may not agree on every matter that comes before our committee, but there is no dispute that we have the very best staff on Capitol Hill. They work incredibly hard. They devote long nights and weekends to this job, sometimes in emergency circumstances where they have to spend time away from their families. And it is important that each and every one of them know that they will not be attacked for the work they do on this committee. And, Mr. Chairman, can you please confirm our agreement for all the staff here in the room?
Yeah, if the gentleman will yield. I want to, in advance, thank the staff on both sides of the aisle. These are people with family and friends and commitment and patriotism, and that does not have a partisan title to it. As we have operated in the past, that should be, while not written explicitly in the rules, that is out of bounds. You want to talk about members of the issue at hand, I think obviously that is fair game. But to inject the staff and be critical in a public way, even privately, I think that would be inappropriate at best. So you and I have had this agreement. It has worked well, and I still concur with that and want to reiterate it here today.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Having been dispensed with the colloquy, are there further amendments?
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment to the Rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, offered by Mr. Connolly.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read.
I thank the
The gentleman
chair.
from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment. Without objection, the amendment is considered as read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is an amendment we considered 2 years ago. The amendment simply would require that before the chairman issues a subpoena, that concurrence is sought and received from the ranking member, or allows the committee to vote on the subpoena as a whole, Seeking minority concurrence or full committee vote was the historical practice of this committee. In a letter dated March 6, 1996, then Chairman William Klinger, a Republican, wrote to Ranking Member Curtis Collins that he intended to use this approach. This was also the practice that Chairman Tom Davis, my predecessor, a Republican, and Henry Waxman, also former chairman of this committee, each followed in their chairmanships. During the committee's organizational meeting in 2007, then Ranking Member Tom Davis, my predecessor, requested that newly appointed Chairman Waxman commit to the following practice. Ranking Member Davis said, and I quote, "The rules package delegates the authority of the chairman to issue subpoenas. I had that authority. I think I always consulted with you," meaning Mr. Waxman, "regarding the use of it. Again, concurrence or a vote of the committee would ensure that the issues are fully aired so that our members and the public can fully understand what the committee is doing. And I think in some cases after discussion, we might want to have that option," unquote. There have only been 3 exceptions to the traditional committee practice, and they were, in addition to yourself, Mr. Chairman, Dan Burton and Darrell Issa. Those exceptions, in my opinion, are not the models we ought to emulate. This committee is the primary oversight committee of the United States House of Representatives. This committee has tremendous authority. With that authority comes responsibility. This committee issued over 40 subpoenas last Congress, but unfortunately never held a single vote on any of them. This amendment includes an exception for emergencies. I would hope that authority would be used sparingly and responsibly should this amendment pass. But I understand there are rare circumstances that will require immediate action. Allowing committee members to debate and vote on subpoenas will provide the transparency and accountability necessary to ensure the subpoena power is exercised responsibly and with the confidence of the full committee. This amendment gives the Oversight Committee a chance to return to a collegial and cooperative manner. Passing this amendment, in my opinion, is an important step in that process. I urge my colleagues to improve the rules before us by adopting this amendment. I thank the Chair.
Thank you. I'll recognize myself in opposition. I opposed to this. It came up in the discussion on the 114th Congress. If I could get it done by tweeting, I would. But sometimes, in order to extract things, you're going to need to be able to issue a subpoena. It's something that has been done in the past. It's something that I would encourage our members to allow us the latitude to do in the future. It has been the precedent of the committee over the last few years, and I'm opposed to the amendment. With that, I'll yield back.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I strongly support Mr. Connolly's amendment. I want to thank him for offering it. This amendment would require that before you issue a subpoena, you obtain my concurrence or allow the committee to vote on the subpoena. Seeking minority concurrence or a committee vote was a historical practice of this committee. There had been only 2 exceptions to the traditional committee practice, and they were, of course, the very famous subpoena king, Chairman Dan Burton and Chairman Darrell Issa. Last Congress, you joined that list. Over the past 2 years, the Chairman issued more than 40 unilateral subpoenas. The committee never held a single vote on any of them. When a subpoena is issued behind closed doors and without deliberation, the chances for abuse increase. For example, the Chairman issued 12 subpoenas over a 3-week period last September, during which we held, quote, emergency, end of quote, hearings on Hillary Clinton. Yet all 12 of these subpoenas were issued unilaterally with no vote and no debate. This included a second subpoena for Brian Pagliano to appear before this committee, despite the fact that he had already asserted the Fifth Amendment, his Fifth Amendment rights. The Chairman sent U.S. Marshals to personally serve the subpoena, even though he could have sent staffers. All of this was done without even notifying Democratic committee members of the plan. This occurred without concurrence, without debate, and without a vote. Although Mr. Pagliano's lawyers informed the committee that he would continue to assert his Fifth Amendment rights, and they even offered to have Mr. Pagliano appear before the committee in a closed-door session, the chairman proceeded with a public resolution to hold him in contempt. This was purely a photo op. We should return to historical subpoena practice that ensured transparency, debate, and accountability, and I strongly urge colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, the question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the Chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman from Virginia.
I just can't believe I lost. And just to be sure, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote.
Are you talking about November, or are you talking about this voting?
Yeah, I'm actually talking about both.
Okay. Fair enough. There is a roll call requested. It was previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Are there any further amendments?
Mr.
Gentlewoman
Chairman.
from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment to the Rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, offered by Ms. Lawrence of Michigan.
May I ask that the amendment be read?
Yeah, the gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment, and without objection, the amendment is considered as read.
Mr. Chairman, nearly a year ago, you and Ranking Member Cummings requested documents from Governor Rick Snyder about how the Flint water crisis occurred and what the governor was doing to address it. I wanted to give you public recognition for your boldness and your commitment, and this being a bipartisan issue, because we knew that this was a horrific event, that people were being poisoned by drinking water in our great country. The goal of the amendment is for the committee to consider issuing a subpoena to Governor Snyder for documents he has refused to give to the committee. I would like to note that our document request was bipartisan. It was not one side or the other. It was agreed upon and signed in a bipartisan way. Therefore, I think the subpoena is necessary and the committee is justified in issuing one. For instance, Governor Snyder has not produced any key documents about how he addressed the crisis. The governor's lawyers wrote that it would cost too much money to respond to the committee's request for these documents. I've sat in these committees and have served in the 114th Congress. Would we accept an excuse like this from any other government agency? We have not, and I don't think we should now. We know that Governor Snyder's response to the crisis was totally inadequate. The people of Flint today, Mr. Chairman, still cannot drink the water coming from their faucets because it's still not safe. Without key documents the governor is withholding, we don't know why the governor was slow to act and so ineffective at solving the problem. We have other reasons to subpoena the governor, too. Governor Snyder admitted that he routinely destroyed emails. He destroyed emails. He said he eventually stopped doing that, but has refused to turn over evidence to prove that. Will we trust any other government agency that tells us that? I have sat through the 114th Congress, and the discussion and issue of destroying emails have been one we have stood firm as a committee against. Why would we trust any other government that has done that? I don't think so, and not without proof. Last week, Ranking Member Cummings and I sent you a letter in which we asked you to allow the committee to debate and vote on this subpoena. Unfortunately, we have not received a response from you. On December 16th, a month earlier, Ranking Member Cummings sent you a letter describing the many ways Governor Snyder has refused to provide the documents that you and Mr. Cummings requested on February 26, 2016. Unfortunately, you did not respond to that letter either. Instead, you decided to close the committee's investigation. Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I feel that that was premature. I am speaking, and I have been documenting, the records will show, this is not a political stance. This is a passion. This is something that I know is wrong that happened in America. And Mr. Chairman, I still believe when this committee answered the plea of the Flint residents, we held 3 hearings to investigate it. And I publicly, again, applaud you for your leadership. I also remember, Mr. Chairman, you personally went to Flint and made public promises that this committee would get the answers. I have stood with you and supported you on this because I, too, being a part of this committee and a resident of Michigan, have told the residents that we would get answers. But here we are today, 1 year later, still waiting for documents. Is this committee going to let him get away with that, offer this amendment, because the committee must decide that question? Let's work together to complete this investigation properly with answers to the men and women and children of the city of Flint.
Thank the gentlewoman.
I yield back.
I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I appreciate the gentlewoman's passion and commitment. I know it's sincere and deep and thorough. I think one of the better things our committee did in the last Congress is to have a rather high-profile hearing, but a very important hearing, bringing together a Republican governor, a Democratic appointee for the as the administrator of the EPA, and Mr. Mark Edwards, who really his only goal in life is to make sure that there is a good, clean water, a lead and copper rule that the executive branch should have issued a long time ago that will go a great distance to help make sure that there's a proper rule in place and guidelines in place. We were disappointed that didn't happen in the Obama administration. We call upon the Trump administration to accelerate that timeline. Now it looks like it's something, what I've been told is 2018. That's highly unacceptable. I think it's wrong. But I am opposed to this amendment. I think they have made great progress. We've got a good working relationship with Mr. Edwards. There are prosecutions in place. The Attorney General is heavily involved in Michigan. But I stand opposed to this amendment. With that, I yield back. So why don't we do this? Members are advised there's a vote on the floor. I'm happy to pick up the rest of this debate. As soon as we have the last vote, we will reconvene, and then we'll recognize the Democrats at that point. The committee stands in recess until the conclusion of this vote. Committee will come to order. Last we left it before votes, I believe we were going to recognize Mr. Cummings on Ms. Lawrence's amendment. The gentleman, ranking member, Mr. Cummings, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I strongly support the Lawrence amendment. 10,000 children in Flint suffered lead poisoning because of decisions made by Governor Snyder's administration. Let me repeat that. 10,000 children in Flint suffered lead poisoning because of a decision made by Governor Snyder's administration. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children still don't have drinking water in Flint. We owe it to them to follow the facts wherever they may lead. In December, the Chairman made the unilateral decision to close our bipartisan investigation into the Flint water crisis. That very same day, I had written him to lay out in detail the ways the Michigan Governor Snyder had failed to comply with the requests for documents that he and I signed in February 2016. Shutting down our investigation, I believe, was premature. Governor Snyder is not above the law. No one is. We had not finished investigating. For a year, Governor Snyder stonewalled this committee and withheld key documents. He admitted that he regularly deleted his emails. He told us that he stopped doing that at some point. But we don't know how many Flint-related documents he deleted because he refused to provide proof of when he stopped deleting his emails. I can tell you if anybody else did that, this committee would be all over him. We'd be having hearings, news conferences, and it would be holy hell. But not for the governor of Michigan. Not him. Not him. The governor's lawyers did not conduct thorough searches on one half of our original request. Documents concerning his administration's response to the health crisis. I guess he just said to hell with us. They don't really matter. A subpoena coming from the Government Reform Committee, I'll just rope-a-dope until they just go away. And that's what we sadly did. Governor Snyder's lawyers did not search for those documents saying that our bipartisan inquiry, let me say that again, bipartisan inquiry, was, and I quote, overly burdensome, end of quote. I wonder what kind of precedent that sets when others are subpoenaed and basically say, you know, the hell with you. Without the documents we asked for, we don't know why his response to the crisis has been so inept. And I want to go along with what Ms. Lawrence said, Mr. Chairman. I want to be real clear. I thank you. I really do. Because you didn't have to hold those hearings. You didn't. And you did. And I appreciate you bringing the governor before us. I appreciate you going to Flint. I appreciate you doing the things that you have done to put a spotlight on this travesty. But you know, I really want, and I know and I want to applaud, by the way, the prosecutors up there in Michigan, because obviously they're taking a close look at this under a microscope. And I want to tell them, keep on looking. And finally, I just think, Mr. Chairman, that we need to bring this, while there may be prosecutions, that's what they're doing in Michigan. But as I said in my opening statement, we have duties right here in our committee. And when I think about those kids suffering, many of whom will never be healed, Many of them will go to the 3rd grade and will not be able to read See Dick Run and won't even know why, but because lead is filling their veins. And so we were right to investigate the topic. Incredibly, the drinking water of Flint continues to be unsafe even to today. And so I want to applaud Ms. Lawrence for her hard work, and with that, I'll yield back and ask the members to support.
Thank the gentleman. Does any other member wish to comment? Gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Plaskett, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I want to give a statement in support of the amendment offered by Representative Lawrence. And I'm doing so knowing, Mr. Chairman, of your support for the investigation in its inception, your concern for the people of Flint, Michigan. The Flint water crisis continues, however, to this day. And the governor, it would appear, has stonewalled this committee's investigation by withholding key documents. And so that's why we're concerned, because of the lack of transparency by the governor, that we have decided, through you, Mr. Chairman, to unilaterally pull the plug on the committee's bipartisan investigation, which was occurring. What sense does that make at this point, when we have gone so far down the road as a committee and have really done some tremendous work on this? During the governor's State of the State address last week, he spent less than 2 minutes discussing the ongoing tragedy in Flint, causing our colleague, Representative Kildee, to say that, quote, the governor is either completely aloof or simply doesn't care about Flint. And why have there been only 600 lead pipes replacements, over 20,000 service lines that have been affected by the lead service have yet to take place? Mr. Chairman, your travels to Flint in March of 2016, when you said you wanted to know, and I quote, who knew what and when and what did they do? And we don't believe, Mr. Chairman, at this time, that we have sufficiently received the answers that you posed when you opened this investigation. Without a complete and total response to the committee's February 26 document request, we'll never know the answers to your questions, Mr. Chairman. Our committee's function is to provide oversight, and when we issue a subpoena request, it needs to have teeth. That means people need to respond. During the second document production status hearing last year, you told, Mr. Chairman, the agencies that when you get a letter from the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, it is not an option. Well, it appears that the governor of Michigan believes that your subpoena request, Mr. Chairman, is an option because you have closed the investigation without him responding to your subpoena. And when the committee, you said, sends a document request, we expect an honest effort to collect and respond to those requests. We expect communications, and we expect you to work with us in good faith, which basically means when you make a commitment, you do what you say you're going to do. The governor of Michigan has not done what he said he would do for this committee. And Mr. Chairman, over the last year and multiple conversations with our staffs, the governor's attorneys have defied the committee's request for documents and refused to conduct searches that the committee has requested. You didn't allow that in the federal government with the investigations that you had on other matters. Why would you allow that in this instance? I don't think that speaks to the integrity for which you have held the chairmanship of this committee, and this committee has conducted its past investigation. They have repeatedly delayed responding to the committee, and the governor's attorneys have treated the committee's request as an afterthought that they respond to only after addressing other inquiries that they view as a higher priority than the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform of the United States Congress? I think not. And so, Mr. Chairman, we are requesting, by reminding you that when you asked the witness at the second document production hearing why the committee should settle for anything less than 100% compliance with the committee's document request, we need to ensure that they have followed that. I now ask you the same question. Why should this committee not demand 100% compliance with our document request from Governor Schneider? Why have we closed an investigation without 100% answers to the questions that this committee posed? I ask the committee support Representative Lawrence's amendment. Thank you.
Thank the gentlewoman. Does any other member seek to have further discussion on the amendment? If not, the question is now on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Uh,
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion, Chair, the noes
Mr.
have it.
Chair, may I have a recorded vote, please?
A roll call is requested. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed until we complete the amendment process. Are there any further amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the
Clerk-
desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment for Mr. Cummings.
Amendment to the Rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform offered by Mr. Cummings of Maryland.
With that, the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member, is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment. Without objection, the amendment is considered as read.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, President Trump has refused to divest his personal businesses. As a result, he's put himself and this country in a serious dilemma. Each time the President acts or makes a statement, or this body acts, there will be lingering questions. Does that action benefit the country, or does it benefit the President's personal finances? This amendment's goal is to remove that question, at least for the actions of this committee. We want to remove any doubt that the actions of this committee might be done in order to benefit President Trump or his vast business entities. The idea behind this amendment is simple and common sense. No bill should pass this committee if it directly benefits the President or his businesses. I think every member of this committee can support this amendment. You don't just have to take my word for it. Republicans are some of the biggest backers of the principle that the President has a duty to avoid conflicts of interest. While an attorney at the Department of Justice in 1974, Antonin Scalia wrote this, and I quote, "It would obviously be undesirable as a matter of policy for the President or Vice President to engage in conduct prescribed by the order or regulations, where no special reason for exemption from the generally applicable standards exists," end of quote. Professor Richard Painter, President George W. Bush's ethics advisor, wrote an op-ed saying this, and I quote, "As long as the President-elect is financially benefiting from his enterprises, every appointment and domestic and foreign policy decision he makes will confront the question of whether he acted to benefit the nation or his own pocket. Moreover, counterparties will face irresistible temptation to benefit Trump's enterprises so as to secure his action or win his favor," end of quote. I did not want to get to this point. I wanted to prevent it. Last December, several Democratic members and I convened a bipartisan panel of top ethics experts so that the American people could hear directly about the challenges that could confront President Trump on day one. These experts strongly recommended that President Trump do what every previous president has done for decades: divest all ownership interests, liquidate his business assets, and place them in a truly blind trust operated by an independent party. Even the Wall Street Journal editorial board warned, and I quote, "If Mr. Trump doesn't liquidate, he will be accused of a pecuniary motive any time he takes a policy position," end of quote. That was the Wall Street Journal, not the Huffington Post. Yet, on January 11th, 9 days before he was inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States, President Trump defied these warnings and announced that he would not relinquish ownership. As of Friday, these conflicts moved from theoretical to reality. Now it falls to us in the Congress to do our job and ensure that these conflicts are thoroughly reviewed and addressed. Mr. Chairman, this committee's rules are more than a collection of do's and don'ts for the members of the committee. They're also expressions of our values. Passing this amendment is an important first step in showing that we value the integrity of our own committee. This committee is a statement that, this amendment is a statement that we act on behalf of the citizens of our great country and not on behalf of the financial interests of one man. We may disagree on policy, but we share the common goal of serving the American public, not the financial interests of the President. I hope all our members will agree that it is important enough to be a part of our rules package today, and with that, I urge members to vote in favor of the amendment. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and I'll recognize myself. This is clearly a gotcha amendment. While it's cute in its creativity, I don't think it is appropriate for the rules package, and I would stand in opposition and hope and urge members to vote no. With that, I yield back. Does any other member wish to be? The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I move to strike the last word, Mr. Chairman. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. You know, today the Senate is considering one of our House colleagues, Congressman Tom Price, to be the next Secretary of HHS. If confirmed, Congressman Price will preside over that agency during an administration that is pledged to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would roll back health care for millions of recently insured Americans and ensure this administration makes America sick again. Questions have been raised about Congressman Price's activities as a member of Congress and whether he took action to enrich himself. For instance, it was reported that he invested in a medical device company less than a week before introducing a bill that would have helped that company. It has also been reported that he purchased thousands of dollars of stock of a company, not on the open market like ordinary investors, but through what is known as a private placement, and learned about that company from another member of Congress who sat on the board. Those are the kinds of questions President Trump will face if he does not completely divest himself, liquidate his assets, and place them into a blind trust operated by a truly independent entity. We don't want any doubt about who we serve when we take actions within this committee. And, Mr. Chairman, this amendment is a common-sense measure to remove any doubt that the action of this committee might be taken to benefit President Trump or any of his businesses. And I urge my colleagues.
Would my friend yield?
Sure, I'll yield to my friend.
I thank my friend. I want to concur in his sentiments and his statements. The Chairman says this is a gotcha amendment. Gosh, I wish it were. I wish the issues weren't as grave, in fact, as they are. And those who are enablers today may come to regret their blind support for the potential for enormous conflicts of interest all over the world. It is actually for the President's own protection that we ought to insist on these measures. And I don't think it's gotcha politics at all. All of us want the President to be beyond suspicion. All of us want to make sure that the decisions he makes, whether we agree with them or not, are not tainted by the stench, potentially, of a blatant conflict. And it seems to me members of the Oversight Committee ought to share on a bipartisan basis in that concern.
Would the gentleman yield on that point?
It is actually not my time to control. I yield back to my friend, Mr. Clay.
I'd be glad to yield to my friend from South Carolina.
I think that, thank you for that. And I just say in fairness to the Chairman, it just strikes me that whether we're on the majority or the minority on this issue, I think we're all after the same thing, which is real accountability from past President, existing President, and there's nothing in the existing rules package that would prohibit us from doing the very things that are outlined in this amendment.
Well, and then that brings me to another issue with my friend from South Carolina. You know, perhaps we need to look at changing House rules, making this committee even in number of members from each party, like the Ethics Committee, so that we truly are balanced here, so that it doesn't come down to a partisan issue, and that we can objectively look at these issues, and perhaps the chairman may want to entertain that idea someday.
My friend yield again
Will the gentleman yield?
to me.
Let me yield to the chairman.
Oh, Lord.
I want to hear this response.
I think he's ready to give you your request.
Are you ready?
Yeah, nice try.
We can jointly propose
I yield
it
back.
as a house rule.
Well, now will my friend yield quickly.
I'll yield back.
I thank my friend. Is it not true that the very valid point made by our friend from South Carolina, if in fact he means it, then he would have no objection to this amendment since it simply restates something he already assumes is in the rules? What harm would it do to make it explicit and clear under the current circumstances?
Gentlemen-
I asked my friend from Missouri.
Gentleman's time has expired. Does any other member wish to have further discussion? Does any other member have further discussion on the amendment? If none, the question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman. Before we do that, sorry, we'll recognize one of our newest members here, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name until I practice in front of the mirror for a while, but you're now recognized for 5 minutes. That guy over there.
Just call me Raja. Just call me Raja, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak very briefly on the ranking member's amendment. I strongly support the amendment. I think there are a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle who have serious concerns about the President's potential conflicts of interest. And unfortunately, we still don't know the extent of any financial entanglements here. Despite what we were told, the President still refuses to release his taxes, thereby denying Americans of a full picture of his financial dealings. The issue has come to a head at this point since, obviously, the President has been sworn into office. This issue is no longer theoretical. It's moved into the realm of reality. Because the President is not taking action to preserve his own integrity, I urge this committee and Congress to take actions to preserve ours. We can help preserve that integrity by adopting this amendment and removing all doubt that any legislative action that we take could potentially benefit President Trump's personal finances. This is why I'm supporting this common sense measure, and I respectfully request all of my colleagues to join me. Thank you.
I think the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Krishnamurthy, did I pronounce right? Close enough?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank the gentleman. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. The Constitution, of course, operates on the principle of separation of powers. And in order to deal with the problem of conflicts of interest, the Constitution sets forth a couple of provisions. One was it said that the President has to be a born U.S. citizen and not a naturalized citizen. But another thing it said in the Emoluments Clause was that the President of the United States could not accept any payments of any kind from foreign powers without the consent of Congress. Now, this President has not come to Congress to ask for our consent in a number of foreign business entanglements that, at least if the press is to be believed, he's engaged in right now. So he's not come to us to ask for our permission, leaving only impeachment as a possible resolution of that problem. That's obviously something that nobody's prepared to do at this point. The President has also said the general ethics statute that applies to other federal officials doesn't apply to him. So the first thing we should do is make sure that the situation doesn't get any worse. And this is why I want to weigh in very strongly for the ranking member's amendment, because this is an ounce of prevention to prevent us from getting into a situation where we have to throw many pounds of cure at the situation. So I think it's very simple, it's straightforward. As several members have said on both sides of the aisle, I think this is something that's clearly within the power of the committee, and I think it establishes a clear ethical guideline going forward at a time of very murky ethics in terms of government generally. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to opine on this amendment? If not, the question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Maryland. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Roll call.
Roll call has been requested, and as previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. I'm not aware of any of the further amendments, but are there any other amendments? If there are no further discussion, I move that the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, I guess, is now in order that the committee will have the roll call vote on the Conley amendment. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chaffetz.
No.
Mr. Chaffetz votes no. Mr. Duncan. Mr. Duncan votes no. Mr. Issa. Mr. Jordan. Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Sanford. Mr. Sanford votes no. Mr. Amash. Mr. Amash votes no. Mr. Gosar. Mr. Desjardins. Mr. Gowdy. Mr. Gowdy votes no. Mr. Farenthold. Mr. Farenthold votes no. Ms. Fox. Mr. Massey. Mr. Meadows. Mr. Meadows votes no. Mr. DeSantis. Mr. DeSantis votes no. Mr. Ross. Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker votes no. Mr. Blum. Mr. Blum votes no. Mr. Heiss. Mr. Heiss votes no. Mr. Russell. Mr. Grothman. Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Hurd. Mr. Hurd votes no. Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer votes no. Mr. Comer. Mr. Comer votes no. Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell votes no. Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings votes yes. Ms. Maloney.
Yes.
Ms. Maloney votes yes. Ms. Norton. Ms. Norton votes yes. Mr. Clay. Mr. Clay votes yes. Mr. Lynch. Mr. Lynch votes yes. Mr. Cooper. Mr. Connolly. Mr. Connolly votes yes. Ms. Kelly. Ms. Kelly votes yes. Ms. Lawrence. Ms. Lawrence votes yes. Ms. Watson-Coleman. Ms. Watson-Coleman votes yes. Ms. Plaskett. Ms. Demmings. Ms. Demmings votes yes. Mr. Krishnamurthy. Mr. Krishnamurthy votes yes. Mr. Raskin. Mr. Raskin votes yes.
Have all members been recorded? Is there any member whose vote? Gentleman from California, Mr. Issa.
Welcome back.
Mr. Issa votes no.
Mr. Desjardins.
You are not recorded. Mr. Desjardins votes no.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Ross.
Mr. Ross votes no.
Gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey.
Mr. Massey votes no.
All members been recorded? Any other member wish to be recorded? Clerk will report the tally.
On this vote, there are 12 yeas and 21 nays.
The amendment, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. It's now in order to have the roll call vote on the Lawrence amendment. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chaffetz?
No.
Mr. Chaffetz votes no. Mr. Duncan? No. Mr. Duncan votes no. Mr. Issa? No. Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Jordan? No. Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Sanford? No. Mr. Sanford votes no. Mr. Amash? Mr. Amash votes no. Mr. Gosar? Mr. Desjardins? Mr. Desjardins votes no. Mr. Gowdy? Mr. Gowdy votes no. Mr. Farenthold? No. Mr. Farenthold votes no. Ms. Fox? Mr. Massey? No. Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Meadows? Mr. Meadows votes no. Mr. DeSantis? Mr. DeSantis votes no. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker votes no. Mr. Blum? Mr. Blum votes no. Mr. Heiss? Mr. Heiss votes no. Mr. Russell? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Hurd? Mr. Hurd votes no. Mr. Palmer? Mr. Palmer votes no. Mr. Comer? Mr. Comer votes no. Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Mitchell votes no. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings votes yes. Ms. Maloney? Yes. Ms. Maloney votes yes. Ms. Norton? Ms. Norton votes yes. Mr. Clay? Mr. Clay votes yes. Mr. Lynch? Mr. Lynch votes yes. Mr. Cooper? Mr. Connolly? Mr. Connolly votes yes. Ms. Kelly? Ms. Kelly votes yes. Ms. Lawrence? Ms. Lawrence votes yes. Ms. Watson-Coleman? Ms. Watson-Coleman votes yes. Ms. Plaskett? Ms. Demings? Ms. Demings votes yes. Mr. Krishnamurthy? Mr. Krishnamurthy votes yes. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes yes.
Clerk will report the tally.
On this vote, there are 12 yeas and 21 nays.
The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. It's now in order to have the roll call vote on the Cummings amendment. The clerk will recall the roll.
Mr. Chaffetz?
No.
Mr. Chaffetz votes no. Mr. Duncan? Mr. Duncan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Jordan? Mr. Sanford? Mr. Sanford votes no. Mr. Amash? Mr. Amash votes no. Mr. Gosar? Mr. Desjarlais? Mr. Desjarlais votes no. Mr. Gowdy? Mr. Gowdy votes no. Mr. Farenthold? Mr. Farenthold votes no. Ms. Fox? Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Meadows? Mr. Meadows votes no. Mr. DeSantis? Mr. DeSantis votes no. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker votes no. Mr. Blum? Mr. Blum votes no. Mr. Heiss? Mr. Heiss votes no. Mr. Russell? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Hurd? Mr. Hurd votes no. Mr. Palmer? Mr. Palmer votes no. Mr. Comer? Mr. Comer votes no. Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Mitchell votes no. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings votes yes. Ms. Maloney?
Yes.
Ms. Maloney votes yes. Ms. Norton? Ms. Norton votes yes. Mr. Clay? Mr. Clay votes yes. Mr. Lynch? Mr. Lynch votes yes. Mr. Cooper? Mr. Connolly? Mr. Connolly votes yes. Ms. Kelly? Ms. Kelly votes yes. Ms. Lawrence? Ms. Lawrence votes yes. Ms. Watson-Coleman? Ms. Watson-Coleman votes yes. Ms. Plaskett? Ms. Demings? Ms. Demings votes yes. Mr. Krishnamurthy? Mr. Krishnamurthy votes yes. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes yes.
All members been recorded. Does any other member wish to be recorded? Clerk will report the tally.
On this vote, there are 12 yeas and 20 nays.
The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. If there's no further discussion, I move that the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform approve the resolution adopting the rules of the committee as amended. The question is on adopting the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it.
Yes, roll call. Give us a roll.
Roll call has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chaffetz?
Aye.
Mr. Chaffetz votes yes. Mr. Duncan? Mr. Duncan votes yes. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes yes. Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Sanford? Mr. Sanford votes yes. Mr. Amash? Mr. Amash votes yes. Mr. Gosar? Mr. Desjarlais? Mr. Desjarlais votes yes. Mr. Gowdy? Mr. Gowdy votes yes. Mr. Farenthold? Mr. Farenthold votes yes. Ms. Fox? Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes yes. Mr. Meadows? Mr. Meadows votes yes. Mr. DeSantis? Mr. DeSantis votes yes. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross votes yes. Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker votes yes. Mr. Blum? Mr. Blum votes yes. Mr. Heiss? Mr. Heiss votes yes. Mr. Russell? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes yes. Mr. Hurd? Mr. Hurd votes yes. Mr. Palmer? Mr. Palmer votes yes. Mr. Comer? Mr. Comer votes yes. Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Mitchell votes yes. Mr. Cummings?
No.
Mr. Cummings votes no. Ms. Maloney?
No.
Ms. Maloney votes no. Ms. Norton? Ms. Norton votes no. Mr. Clay? Mr. Clay votes no. Mr. Lynch? Mr. Lynch votes no. Mr. Cooper? Mr. Conley? Mr. Conley votes no. Ms. Kelly? Ms. Kelly votes no. Ms. Lawrence? Ms. Lawrence votes no. Ms. Watson-Coleman? Ms. Watson-Coleman votes no. Ms. Plaskett? Ms. Demings? Ms. Demings votes no. Mr. Krishnamurthy? Mr. Krishnamurthy votes no. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes no.
Have all members been recorded? Does any other member wish to have their vote recorded? Clerk will report the tally.
On this vote, there are 21 yeas and 12 nays.
The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to. The resolution adopting the rules of the committee is approved. There will be no additional further votes, but I would like to take this time to talk about the subcommittees.
Mr. Chairman, yield just for a second.
Yes.
Mr. Issa seems like he can't find his seat, Mr. Chairman. You do have a seat for him, don't you?
Yeah, but the problem is I've been sitting in it for the last 2 years. So as I was saying, subcommittee assignments are in the folders. I'd like to introduce the subcommittee chairman. This Congress, the committee will have 6 subcommittees with the following jurisdictions. Subcommittee on Government Operations will have legislative and oversight jurisdiction over government management and accounting measures, the economy, efficiency, and management of government operation and activities, procurement, federal property, public information, federal records, federal civil service, government reorganizations, the United States Postal Service, the National Archives, the Census Bureau, and the District of Columbia. Very pleased that the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, who was the chair of the subcommittee in the previous Congress, will continue on as the subcommittee chairman of this subcommittee. Subcommittee on Healthcare Benefits and Administrative Rules will have oversight jurisdiction over healthcare policy, administration and programs, regulatory affairs, government-wide rules and regulations, financial services, and the administration and solvency of benefit and entitlement programs, and legislative jurisdiction over regulatory affairs and the federal paperwork reduction. The subcommittee will be chaired by Mr. Jim Jordan of Ohio. He was the subcommittee chairman in the previous Congress, and we're thrilled to have him continue on in that capacity. Subcommittee on Interior, Energy, and Environment will have oversight jurisdiction of the energy policy, public lands, environmental policy, fish and wildlife, mining, energy development, pollution, and related regulations. The subcommittee chairperson will be new. As you recall, we had Cynthia Lummis in the previous Congress. She has retired from Congress, but we're thrilled to have Mr. Blake Farenthold of Texas, who's in the Houston area with much of the energy flowing through his district. He's been a longtime member of this committee. I serve with him also on Judiciary, and I think he'll be a fine subcommittee chairman here for us as well. I'm glad that he will be taking on that gavel. The Subcommittee on Information Technology will have oversight jurisdiction over information security, including cybersecurity and federal information security, information technology policy, management and procurement, emerging technologies, intellectual property, telecommunications, and a big one for me personally is privacy. The subcommittee will be chaired by Mr. Will Hurd of Texas. I thought that was one of the more productive subcommittees we had. They've taken on important, interesting topics. I have personal interest in this one as well, but we're thrilled to have Will Hurd back as the subcommittee chair. The Subcommittee on Intergovernmental Operations will have legislative and oversight jurisdiction over the relationship between the Federal Government and states and municipalities, including unfunded mandates, Federal regulations, grants, and programs. This is a new reconfiguration of a subcommittee compared to the 114th Congress. We're very pleased to have Mr. Gary Palmer of Alabama, who will be the subcommittee chairman. He has a deep background and understanding of this, a passion for the issue. There are tens of billions of dollars that flow out through these intergovernmental operations, and we're pleased to have Mr. Palmer of Alabama, as I said, as the new subcommittee chairman on that. The Subcommittee on National Security will have oversight jurisdiction over national security, homeland security, foreign operations, including relationships between the United States and international organizations of which the United States is a member. It will also cover immigration, defense, and criminal justice. A big portfolio, to say the least. But we have the very talented Mr. Ron DeSantis of Florida, who served in our military as a JAG, and he is passionate about these issues, well-versed in these issues as an attorney. We're pleased to have him as the chair of that subcommittee. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Cummings to introduce the subcommittee ranking members.
Thank you. But in addition to that, first of all, I would like to start by announcing the election of Jerry Connolly as the vice-ranking member of our committee. Jerry Connolly has been very much committed to this committee, relentless and unwavering, and so we're very thankful to him for taking on that task. And I'm pleased to announce that the 6 members of our caucus have agreed to serve as subcommittee ranking members on the Oversight Committee. They are Stephen Lynch, Subcommittee on National Security, and Steve has been relentless on these issues and done extensive traveling and addressing issues that are so important, and certainly has been my right-hand person with regard to postal. Jerry Connolly, Subcommittee on Government Operations, speaks for himself. He's been a real leader in that area. Robin Kelly, Subcommittee on Information and Technology, again, another champion of those issues. And we have, Mr. Chairman, we have freshmen. Well, let me go. Stacy Plaskett, who is not a freshman, but she will be our subcommittee ranking on the Interior and Energy and Environment. But then we have 2 freshmen who have an opportunity that took me years to get, and they are subcommittee rankings, and that will be Val Demings, who will be our subcommittee ranking on intergovernmental affairs, and we look forward to her bringing her extensive experience to that position. And Raja Krishnamurthy will head up our subcommittee on health care benefits and administrative rules. So we're very excited about all of these folks heading up their subcommittees on our side. And again, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking forward to working with you as we move forward in this coming year.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 5 minutes.
I was just wondering on Interior, before Indian Affairs was listed under there, and I don't see it listed now, is that still part of that committee?
The gentlewoman is correct. Issues related to that. It falls under the subset of the Department of Interior and would fall within that subcommittee.
So it's still there, although it's
Yes,
not
yes.
listed? Okay, thank you.
Gentlewoman yields back. That ends the committee's organizational portion of the meeting today. If there are no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.